is surrender important to awakening? So first of all, we have to define what awakening is. Let's get practical. What is awakening? And then we can talk about what it means to surrender. So now, after 11 years of teaching, and I think I've been like this before, but you kind of always forget what you are in the past, so you always speak about it as if it's in the moment, especially with my fish brain memory, 6-second rule. So after 11 years of teaching, what I feel like now is that I just have no attachment to any teaching in any way. I can see how this can be spoken about from many different angles and have equal relevance. I could see how a neuroscientist could look inside the brain and come to an awakening. I could see how somebody into Kundalini awakening and energy could have an awakening from that. Somebody that's into Christianity or Islam or Jainism. And then the way the mind interprets it could be completely different for everybody. I don't see it as one way anymore. Maybe I've been like that for quite a while now. So I don't see, I do think it's the end of seeking, but that could be expressed in different ways. That was what I learned. So I learned to phrase it in the way of the end of seeking. But I could see somebody putting it in the positive of finding God and loving God and being content in God's arms. I don't know, whatever stories we tell ourselves. It's all story. It's all a narrative. And we'll more than likely speak in the way in which we learnt before the awakening happened. But from a non-dual perspective, because that's the school, the kind of school Lisa went through, I will speak about it from non-dual perspective. So awakening from a non-dual perspective would be the dropping of the sense that you are a person, a narrative, emotions, feelings, the body, that you are something. So most people in this world, they walk around believing in themselves. They're constantly putting up flags like, this is what I am. I am rich. Woohoo! Can't you see my Gucci? I am more intelligent than. Can't you hear my knowledge and wisdom? I am a doctor. Can't you see my telescope? I am a fridge. That's a joke, obviously. You claim all these things like I am a good person, I am better than, and you're always looking for evidence of what you believe yourself to be. So if you believe you're better than other people, then you'll want to surround yourself with people that think that. You're not going to surround yourself with people that think that you're worse than. Then most likely the person that you'll surround yourself with is somebody that's got an identity that's like, I am lower than everybody else. So I am better than will partner up with I am lower. So the lower person will look up at the higher and they'll be like, me. I am higher, I'm lower. Both validating each other. And that's what we do as people. And this kind of happens, you could say in one way in thought, but it also happens through feeling in the body. When you're better than, you can imagine the person has a more upright chest and a particular way in which they walk, and then the lower than, there'll be so it's and then there's also emotions that come with it. So it's also kind of feeling, but we don't really know what thoughts and feelings are and what the line between them is. Like what comes first, the chicken or the egg, the feeling or the thought? The thought, the feeling, the thought, the feeling. And then we have this whole kind of unconscious world that's funky as well. Yes, yeah, so there's this dynamic happening in these bodies. that doesn't seem to happen in animals, where we become self-aware as humans. So we look in the mirror and we're like, oh, that's me in the mirror, I am this body. And then we identify with a narrative about ourselves, with our actions, with what we do, what we've done, how we're better than, worse than, nicer than, uglier than, better at German than, you know the beeswax. And what seems to happen in awakening, although in a way awakening is so much more mysterious, there is some form of dropping away that stops your essence, your sense of being, the consciousness, the looking, so this initial sense of being contained inside the story of you. So it's almost like it explodes out, a little bit like, the innie or the outie belly. It's like belly button. It's like the belly button goes and becomes an outie. So it's like your sense of self becomes more in line with this moment, with what's actually happening, rather than the narrative of what's happening and who you believe yourself to be. So before, it's like all you're consumed about is yourself, and then this moment is secondary. This consciousness, this looking, this beingness is secondary. And then after awakening, that becomes in the forefront and the person kind of goes into the background. That's what it feels like. So in non-duality terms, it would be there's an expansion, or there's a dropping of the me, or I don't like that terminology anymore, because it doesn't drop the character, it drops the attachment to that's who you are. That's not who you are. That's something that's appearing in this. It's like a vessel appearing in this. And the way that surrender comes in is what often happens in this process, although I'm realizing it can be so radically different for everybody. But what can happen for a lot of people is a surrendering to, on the human level, their circumstances. It doesn't mean that you surrender to being abused or being treated badly or staying in a crappy job. It's more, there's like an internal surrender that knows that getting things, being things, and doing things in life aren't what you're actually looking for. And there's a surrendering more into this moment, you could say, or to that which is prior to thought, prior to ideas, prior to things. This is very difficult to speak about, because it's not easy in English. So there is this surrender. So, in the past, there might have been like a huge urge and need to be successful. Whereas this, when you get into this, it's like this surrender begins to take over, where that's just not seen as the most important thing in life anymore. What's seen to be more important is what's actually happening now, not this idea of what you're going to get. And the same with pains, like prior, it'd be like pushing away pain. So if you felt pain, it would be like a mad activity to eat lots of food, consume lots of TV, drink alcohol, smoke drugs, or do drugs to get away from the pain or the discomfort that you're feeling in the moment. Whereas there is a surrender to that. So if you feel hurt by something that someone said, rather than going into a tsunami of action and dialogue and getting everyone against that person and doing all these things, there is like a surrender into that pain of, that hurt, but there's not this desperate need to get away from it anymore. It's not like you're looking for painful experiences unless you're sadistic. It's just that when pain arises, it's not seen as something that's going to kill you anymore. It's like, yeah, this is part of it. So there's this element that begins to happen of surrender. So surrender from this mad attachment to achievement, and then this surrender from fighting pain or disappointment, or, well, that's pain, or, like all these negative feelings. So you could say like the life becomes a lot more balanced, because there isn't these wild swings of running away and attaching to, and running away and grabbing onto. So in Buddhism, they'd call it craving, this craving. And I feel like that's really true of what a human not knowing who they are is like. They're constantly craving something. Another image that they have in Buddhism that I always really liked was the hungry ghosts. It's like a realm. It's not like the ultimate depiction. And the hungry ghosts is these like beings that have tiny, tiny little mouths and tiny necks, but massive stomachs. And they can never eat enough to fill up their massive stomachs because their mouth and throat isn't big enough. Pardon me. And this is a little bit like this, when you don't know who you are, when there hasn't been this realization that you're this moment or this consciousness which is experiencing now, or this beingness, whatever you're calling it, or no thing and everything. Like without that awakening and realization and surrendering into this moment, it's like that is a bit what it's like. You're trying to cram experience into your face, but your face, your mouth, your pie hole isn't big enough. It just doesn't satisfy. No matter how much you eat, you never manage to satisfy that hunger. So this is where surrender comes in. And what happens is people take surrender very personally, and that can like get all a bit muddled, but it also can be really beautiful. The reason it can get a bit muddled is because the person takes on the story like, I need to surrender to my circumstances. I think it's quite big in Christianity and in religions, like surrendering to God's will, which in one way is really true, because another realization that can happen is this seeing that life is happening, that you aren't this big controller that you thought yourself to be. You aren't like the center of the universe. So life is happening and you're part of life. You're not the driver of the dream bus. You're more the passenger. So that there is the truth to that, but it can, like, for me, why not talk about myself? It's not like I do very often. It's a joke. For me, it's like like what happened here before and after awakening was false ideas about surrender. Particularly, somebody behaves in a bit bad way, and you kind of know it's your projection. So you're not caught in defending or arguing or, running away from it. So you know that it's your projection, because everything's your projection. You know how it makes you feel, but you don't really act on it because you're like, oh, this is my reaction. This is my pain body, or this is my trauma, or this is old seeking patterns. So you don't really act on it. And that's not really what surrender's about. It is like a recognition that everything's your projection, but it doesn't mean non-action. Like a good example for me sometimes is surrender could be action. So, but the person takes it as surrender. So there's times in my life where I've been too passive and not looking out enough at other people's motive, because there's a focus on surrendering to all the dynamics that's happening here. You might recognize that in yourself, but you might also be the other way, where there's too much blame or too much guilt. So surrender can also be a big part in Roger Castillo's teaching. I'm not sure if he would speak about surrender, but or Ramesh as well, who were both my teachers, Balsika, they I can't remember if they speak about surrender, but there is an element to that. It's like, thy will be done, thy will be done. It's like this element of giving up control, like you aren't the doer. So giving control back to life. But again, this can be misconstrued, and there can be, dependent on your personality, like too much focus on like surrendering this body and not enough action. It's not about not acting. Surrender can be immense action. It's surrendering something deeper. It's surrendering that attachment to yourself and to life. Yeah, this belief that that's who you are, and this belief that you are the controller and you doer of life. But yeah, it's so different for everybody that in the end, people are always going to misconstrue parts of what's being said, and in a way it's part of it, because maybe sometimes there has to be an extreme leaning to get rid of old ideas. So yeah, that's why I'm always recommending people to work one-on-one with people, so these things can be picked up, you know, and listen to lots of different teachers. Not many teachers say that, but because then it's like you see it from different perspectives and you don't get stuck. You know, if you're just listening to surrender teachings, maybe somebody hasn't said this thing to you, that surrender can also be action. And it doesn't mean that that teacher you're listening to is bad, it's just that no teacher can possibly teach everything. That's like a 360-degree teaching. That doesn't really make sense, that analogy. Oh, I hope I'm not... I have to take my slippers off. It's in Northern Europe, we've been going through these intense heat, and where it's ending the summer now, so it's like that stage where you're hot, cold, hot, cold. It's like you're not quite hot all the time, but you can, yeah, the body gets hot and then cold. Slippers on, slippers off, slippers on, slippers off. Yeah, I really hope I didn't show up my skirt then. That's made me paranoid. No, you can't see up my skirt. Okay. Could you see up my skirt? No, you can't see up my skirt. Oh, I've got to tell you this really funny experience that happened to me and one of my ex-partners one time. So we were just, it was like 2011 or 12, and we were working out how to stream. And we didn't realize that we'd got streaming on, and it was streaming to YouTube. So we didn't realize. And my partner was wearing these like white cotton pajamas, and he was standing towards the light, so you could like see through the pajamas, like really extremely. And then I think he farted, or I farted or something, and then yeah, I think he was also saying some inappropriate things, and there was something like 50 people watching us. Maybe one of you were one of the people watching us. I think it went on for like an hour. Yeah, the horror shows of the internet sometimes, eh? We did also laugh a lot about it afterwards. Especially the farting part. I can't exactly remember what happened. Yeah. So can be really beautiful, you know, the teaching of surrender. But it's also keeping in mind like all these different angles, like who is it that's surrendering? And where does this person that feels like it's surrendering feels like it will go? So when you surrender, like I used to teach, like this isn't the plus teaching, this is the negative teaching, it's like the takeaway. But I don't say that so often anymore. But like when you do an action like surrender, it's like who is surrendering? So it's always questioning like who do you think yourself to be, which is really mind-blowing, because you've always taken yourself to be the person that's surrendering, and then that person is going to get to awakening. But that action of surrendering is thoughts and feelings that are arising, and who you are is the witnessing of that, which is not located. So this is the other problem when you speak about witness or consciousness, is that conscious of that witness isn't located anywhere. So in a way you could say it's invisible. So you could also say there's no consciousness, because that consciousness is all places. So what you are is everything now, which is this immense expansion and freedom. You're not limited to this person that is like, okay, I'm going to surrender now. Who is going to surrender now? And what are you dreaming of when you surrender? That doesn't mean don't do it. It can be super beautiful to surrendering to what's happening. So say, you know, there's so many like kamikaze things that can happen in life. So say, you know, your car gets written off. It's like there is pain in that, and you can do emotional release in that, but there's also this element of surrendering it to life. Like, this is what life was, and I can't take that out from life, because if I took it out, that experience of the car being crashed, then everything else would change. And is that something that I want to begin to play with? It's like the domino effect. Like, what will begin to happen if you take one thing out? And is that ever possible? And is it ever possible for there to be a somebody that can make a different choice? Like, can you have ever made the choice not to go into the car and crash it that day? Like that's really mind-bending. And who is this person that you're imagining? Like, so Khaleesi is my dog. She's beautiful Southeast Asian village dog. And she doesn't think about these things. She doesn't think, you know, like, if we have an accident, like occasionally she doesn't really pull me off the bike, but something happens. Like the other day, we're cycling down a path, and this cat just jumps out of the bush at us, you know, and like didn't end up being an accident, but that was close to an accident. But we have these kind of mishaps on the bike sometimes, and we both get a bit hurt sometimes. Mostly me. Khaleesi normally pegs out of the way before anything lands on her, but you know, she gets, you know, the shock. But she doesn't think after this experience, when I'm limping home, this was actually the cause of why I bumped my head, because of a bike ride of us. But she doesn't think when we're limping home, like, I shouldn't have gone on my bike, or this shouldn't have happened, or if I didn't do that. That she doesn't have that possibility. It's like, what happened? And there's no other question for her. And that's the same for, I think, most animals on this planet. They can't really contemplate something being different. So we can contemplate something different being different, but that doesn't mean that that's real. But we take it to be real, that there could be something different. I could have chosen to not get in that car, and then we spend days and days in regret. But that's such a sophisticated thinking system, but it's not actually a reality, because things can't be different from what happened, and you could never have made a different choice. Through contemplating that, what we can do is we can update the beautiful software of these bodies, and we can make a different choice in the future. So in the future, we could think, you know, do this, or do that, or do, you know, we could have a good old chinwag, and that will change it. And I assume that's part of the reason why we've had this ability to reflect. But because we take our thoughts to be so serious, we really believe there's a you there that's guilty, did something wrong, and could have done something different. So we spend ages in regret of ourselves, when this isn't actually a possibility. You could never have made a different choice to what you made in that moment, which is obvious. You could never have done that. You can never have acted differently. And that choice you made was dependent on every goddamn thing that came before, and this bizarre thing that's appearing now in this moment. The fact that in that moment, that was the urge and the action that appeared, and we don't really know where that comes from. We can detail it as like, oh, well, Lisa did this and Lisa did that, and then she made a choice to do this. But in the moment, it's these thoughts and these feelings are appearing out of we don't know what. It's really mysterious. So in this moment, they're just appearing, and then in the past timeline, that's our story, our narrative of what happened. But that's not actually a fixed thing. We know from our own experience, and even science is saying this now, that, you know, our narratives of what happened aren't necessarily what happened, because our mind changes things. Our mind changes things up to 40% if it's got a heightened emotion. So our mind, and we also leave out lots of things from our detailed stories of our past. There's so many things that are left out. All those cups of teas that have been made, they've all been left out from your memory. It's like, oh yeah, I wish I didn't make that cup of tea in 1998 when I did and this cup of tea in 90. Those are all gone from your memory. All the toilet breaks have gone. All the times you bumped your leg into the sofa. There's so many things from the memory that have disappeared, and your memory changes over time. Like, we're not liars as such, not purposely lying, but me as well, I know I do this, is that your memory will begin to slowly merge into what you want to tell about yourself. So your current story that you want to tell about yourself. So if you want to tell and present to the world that you are a really honest, beautiful person, then your mind will begin to leave out all the times you lie and highlight and bring forward these other times you told the truth, and kind of like will become a new story of you. So stories that we tell ourselves are highly inaccurate. We don't know for sure that they definitely happened because we only know this moment with these memories and these images of what came before. So it's a funky dance. It's a funky chicken dance anyway. And this is why non-duality is really profound and beautiful, because it's constantly questioning something which should be questioned by every goddamn human. My God, should we question our thoughts? Is it true that we are all souls that live inside the body? Is it true that we should all get educated in the education system? I can't think of all these things. But you know, you get my beeswax, my chin wag. Is it true anything you think? Anything that we feel? It's true relatively, as in that's what you're thinking and that's what you're feeling. And there can be relative truth. So it's like if I describe that I just walked across the room and tripped over, that's like a relative truth. I didn't just do that, but with being hypothetical. But it's not the truth. It's not the actual truth. So I feel angry. You know, prior to getting into this subject, it's like instead of I feel angry, it'd be like, you made me angry. That made me angry. And then I now say I feel angry, but even I feel angry is a profound concept that's not necessarily true. There is energy arising in the body, like, and yeah. It's not necessarily the truth, you know, everything that we think. I mean, we could just go completely didally with that, but like everything, like the idea of death, the idea of life, the idea of infinite, the idea of finite, all of these are concepts, the idea of love that we as humans have made up. And then we're trying to name the experience, and then we don't know how much that warps the experience. Because you can only see your thoughts in your brain, so when you're naming it, like how much does it warp what's actually happening out there? Like how can we know the difference or know if there is an out there, or this is just like a hologram and we're inside this computer space and experiencing, apparently through this virtual reality called a human. But it's just a game. Like, there's so many questions. The reason that humans do this is a form of survival. Like to name and secure your environment and to make it the same every day is going to more than likely make your survival chances higher and reduce fear. Because then you're not looking at the unknown abyss, which humans aren't very good at. So it's like, in a way, it's like an evolutionary survival technique to keep naming and renaming your environment and retelling the story of yourself and who the others are. But it just goes a bit insane, wouldn't you say? It just gets loopy because it keeps doing this and repeating itself. You know, anything that doesn't fit into the category of you, it's like, danger, danger, danger. This is why we most probably have so many racial wars. Well, I'm positive it is. Because it's like, they are different, danger, different, different. It just makes people feel scared because it's unknown. But this is what is beautiful about non-duality, because it's trying to open that up and also saying, okay, so what happens if you just sit with that unknownness? Like, what happens if you just sit with not knowing and that insecurity, rather than running away from it and trying to build lots of constructs? And it could have two possible effects. It could send you insane, or there could be like a dropping deeper into yourself where there's a greater acceptance of pain, and there's like less desire to run away from pain, and more openness to the mystery of this life.